when my greedy aunt ripped Grandma's $5 million cashier's check into pieces right in front of my face. She laughed and said, "You don't deserve a single penny of this family's legacy." The rest of my family stood around the dining room table, smirked, and watched as the paper scraps fluttered onto the carpet like confetti. They thought they had just ruined my life, erased my inheritance, and put me right back in my place. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply knelt down, picked up every torn piece, and walked out to my car. Exactly 15 minutes later, my phone rang, and the call that came through left my entire family utterly speechless. Follow my story until the end to see how far a simple trap can go, and drop a comment right now with the city or country you're watching from so I can reply to you directly. My name is Clara. I am 31 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I was the only person in our family who visited my grandmother, Eleanor, out of genuine love rather than financial calculation. Oak Ridge Estate had been in our family for over 40 years. It was a sprawling, stone-built manor nestled on 10 acres of prime land, worth millions on its own. But to my Aunt Victoria and Uncle Richard, it was not a family home. It was a giant piggy bank waiting to be cracked open. When Grandma Eleanor's health began to decline, my relatives suddenly became very attentive. Victoria, who had not called in 3 years, started showing up every weekend with cheap flowers and fake tears. Uncle Richard, who spent his life burning through failed business ventures, suddenly took a deep interest in Grandma's bank accounts. I was the one who slept on the cot in her hospital room. I was the one who squeezed her hand during those final, painful nights while Victoria and Richard were downstairs in the kitchen, already arguing over who would get the estate's vintage art collection. When Grandma finally passed away, the grief hit me like a physical blow. Less than 48 hours after the funeral, Victoria summoned everyone to the main dining room of Oak Ridge Estate. She sat at the head of the mahogany table like a queen claiming her throne, flanked by Richard and her 2 spoiled grown children. "Let's get one thing straight, Clara," Victoria said, not even waiting for the attorney to sit down. "You have been living in Dad's shadow, clinging to Grandma like a parasite. The gravy train stops today." I looked at her, exhausted. "Victoria, Grandma was buried 2 days ago. Can't we just honor her memory for one afternoon?" Richard snorted, adjusting his gold wristwatch. "Honor does not pay taxes, Clara. We are here to liquidate the estate." The estate executor, an elderly gentleman named Mr. Vance, who had served as Grandma Eleanor's personal attorney for 30 years, set a thick leather briefcase onto the table. He looked around the room, his eyes lingering on Victoria and Richard with cold, professional disdain. "If everyone is finished making demands," Mr. Vance said smoothly, "we may proceed." Victoria folded her arms across her chest. "Just skip the legal jargon, Vance. Everything comes to Richard and me as her direct surviving children. Clara gets whatever scrap of a trust fund was set up years ago." Mr. Vance did not flinch. He opened his briefcase, pulled out a crisp, heavy paper document, and laid it face down on the table. "Your mother was a very clever woman, Victoria," Mr. Vance remarked, "and she was fully aware of the financial pressure you both put on her during her final years. Before we address the primary estate, there is a specific bequest that must be executed immediately." He turned the document over. Attached to the front was an official cashier's check drawn directly from First National Bank. The blue ink was bold and undeniable. "Pay to the order of Clara Mitchell. Amount: $5 million. The room went completely dead silent. Victoria's jaw dropped. What is that?" "This is a certified cashier's check drawn from your mother's private liquid investment portfolio," Mr. Vance explained calmly. "It belongs solely to Clara." $5 million. My breath caught in my throat. I had never asked for a dime. I had just loved her. "No!" Victoria shrieked, slamming both palms onto the table. "This is fraud. She manipulated an old, dying woman." "Grandma was completely sharp until her final day, Victoria," I said quietly. "You scheming little rat." Uncle Richard spat, standing up so fast his chair skidded backward across the hardwood floor. "You think you are walking out of here with $5 million while we get stuck dividing a property that needs repairs?" Before Mr. Vance could intervene, Victoria reached across the table with terrifying speed. Her hands grabbed the check, yanking it free from the paperclip. "Victoria, do not," Mr. Vance warned. "Touch that document, and there will be severe legal consequences." Victoria did not care. Fueled by pure rage, she stared me dead in the eye. "You don't deserve a single penny of this family's legacy," she snarled. With two swift, violent tears, she ripped the $5 million cashier's check into 4 pieces. She threw the shredded bits into the air, watching with a wicked smirk as they fluttered down onto the carpet like confetti. "There," Victoria sneered. "Your $5 million is trash. Just like you." Richard burst into a loud, mocking laugh. Victoria's kids joined in, smirking as if they had just won the greatest victory of their lives. Mr. Vance stood frozen in shock, his face red with indignation as he began to threaten them with court orders. I looked at the torn pieces lying near my shoes. I did not yell. I did not scream at Victoria. I did not even shed a tear in front of them. Instead, I slowly knelt down on the cold floor. One by one, I gathered the 4 torn pieces of the check. I smoothed them out in my palm, stood up, and tucked them neatly into my coat pocket. "You are a sad excuse for a family," I said quietly. "Get out of our house, Clara," Victoria barked, waving her hand dismissively. "Go cry in your cheap apartment." I turned on my heel and walked out of Oak Ridge Manor. The heavy oak doors clicked shut behind me. I walked down the stone steps toward my car, my hands shaking from adrenaline. I sat in the driver's seat and closed the door. Instead of putting the key in the ignition, I leaned over to the glove box. I reached deep into the back until my fingers touched a thick, manila envelope. Grandma Eleanor had given me this envelope 3 weeks before she died, while I was sitting beside her hospital bed holding her frail hand. "Clara, my sweet girl," she had whispered that night, her eyes sparkling with a mischievous glint. "Your aunt and uncle think money makes them powerful, but greed always blinds people to the simplest traps. Take this envelope, put it in your car, and promise me one thing: open it only when they destroy the paper." At the time, I had not understood, but as I sat in the driveway, looking at the torn pieces of the check on my passenger seat, her words echoed with terrifying clarity. My fingers broke the red wax seal. Inside was a single page of handwritten parchment alongside a small black thumb drive. I unfolded the letter and began to read. Inside the house, Victoria was feeling victorious. She poured herself a glass of expensive scotch and toasted with Richard. "Vance is a fool," Victoria laughed. "The check is destroyed. A bank cannot cash a pile of ripped paper, and without that check, Clara has no leverage." "Should we call the bank just to be safe?" Richard asked. "Make sure she cannot request a reissue?" "Already ahead of you," Victoria smirked, pulling her phone from her designer handbag. She put the call on speakerphone so Richard and the executor could hear. She dialed the direct line for First National Bank's senior estate manager, Mr. Harrison. The call connected on the 3rd ring. "First National Bank, this is Mr. Harrison speaking." "Harrison, it is Victoria," she said, her voice dripping with artificial authority. "I am calling to inform you that the cashier's check for $5 million made out to Clara Mitchell has been officially voided and destroyed. I am instructing you to freeze those funds and return them to the primary estate immediately." There was a long silence on the line. "Mrs. Victoria, did you say the physical check was destroyed?" "Yes," Victoria boasted, looking at Richard with a wink. "Irrevocably ripped to shreds right here, in the dining room." On the other end of the phone, Mr. Harrison sighed, a deep, weary sound that carried a sudden, chill weight into the room. "Mrs. Victoria, do you have any idea what you have just done?" Victoria's smirk faltered slightly. "What do you mean?" "I stopped Clara from stealing our money." "That check was not a standard disbursement," Mr. Harrison replied coldly. "It was a certified tracking instrument attached to a conditional trigger clause in your mother's revocable living trust. Mrs. Eleanor explicitly instructed us that if the physical check was accepted peacefully by Clara, the $5 million would be transferred from a sub-account, leaving the rest of the estate intact for probate." Victoria frowned, a cold knot forming in her stomach. "And since I destroyed it?" Your mother knew exactly how you and Richard would react, Mr. Harrison said. Clause 9b of her trust states that if the physical check was destroyed or intercepted by any member of the immediate family before deposit, it would be treated as an explicit act of hostility against her designated sole heir. The Scotch glass in Richard's hand began to tremble. Wait a minute. What are you saying, Harrison? I am saying that destroying that check did not stop the transfer, Mr. Harrison explained coldly. It activated the secondary protocol. By destroying that paper, you automatically triggered the immediate, irrevocable dissolution of the primary estate. Victoria's face drained of all color. Dissolution? What does that mean? It means Oakridge Manor, the land, the liquid accounts, the art collection, and all surrounding properties have just been instantly transferred into Clara Mitchell's sole private trust, Mr. Harrison declared. The $5 million check was merely a test, a small fraction of what your mother possessed. By tearing up that check, you surrendered the entire $40 million estate to her. Victoria screamed into the phone. That is impossible. We are her children. We will sue. You can try, Mrs. Victoria, Mr. Harrison added. But there is one more detail you should be aware of. Over the last 5 years, you and Richard took out several substantial business loans totaling $2.8 million, using your mother's estate as a co-signer, correct? Richard went stiff. Those were private arrangements. Under the terms of Clause 9b, Mr. Harrison continued, when the estate defaulted to Clara upon the destruction of the check, all secondary liabilities and co-sign debts were legally severed from the property itself and reassigned directly to the individuals who initiated them. First National Bank has initiated collection proceedings against you and Richard personally for the $2.8 million balance. Have a good afternoon. The line went dead. The silence that fell over the room was suffocating. Victoria dropped her phone onto the rug. Richard looked like he was about to collapse. Before either of them could speak, the heavy front doors of Oakridge Manor creaked open. I stepped back into the foyer, holding the thumb drive and the letter from Grandma Eleanor in my hand. Behind me stood Mr. Vance, who had received a text notification from the bank the exact moment the trust protocol shifted. He smiled at me with profound respect. Victoria spun around, her eyes wild with panic. Clara, she gasped, running toward me with her hands outstretched. Clara, sweetie, it was a mistake. You know how stressed I have been. Uncle Richard practically tripped over his own feet trying to reach me. Clara, please. We are family. You can have the $5 million. I looked at them both, these two people who, just 15 minutes ago, had mocked my grief and shredded my dignity. The $5 million was Grandma's olive branch to you, I said, my voice cool and unwavering. If you had let me take that check and leave, you would have kept this house. You would have had your debts covered by the estate. We did not know. Victoria sobbed, real tears streaming down her face from the terror of financial ruin. She tricked us. No, Victoria. I corrected her gently. She just knew who you really were. She gave you a choice between greed and peace, and you chose greed. I handed the thumb drive to Mr. Vance. Mr. Vance, this drive contains the audio recordings Grandma made during her final months, documenting every threat and financial demand Victoria and Richard made against her while she was sick. They will be instrumental, Miss Mitchell, Mr. Vance replied smoothly. I turned back to my aunt and uncle. You have 24 hours to pack your personal belongings and clear out of my house. If you are still on Oakridge property by 2 p.m. tomorrow, I will have the sheriff's department escort you off the premises. Leaving Oakridge Manor that day, I felt a deep, peaceful quiet. Over the next few months, the legal dust settled quickly. Victoria and Richard tried to hire attorneys to contest Grandma Eleanor's trust, but the moment our legal team produced the audio recordings and the signed trigger clauses, no lawyer would touch their case. Unable to cover the $2.8 million in debt they had accumulated, Richard was forced to declare personal bankruptcy. Victoria had to liquidate her investments and sell her home at a massive loss just to keep the bank from seizing her assets. They went from living lives of luxury to struggling to pay rent on modest apartments. As for me, I moved back into Oakridge Manor, not to live in luxury, but to preserve what Grandma Eleanor truly cared about: I established the Eleanor Mitchell Foundation, transforming half of the estate's grounds into a community hospice center where elderly patients could receive loving, free end-of-life care. No one would ever have to lie in a hospital bed alone, worried about their family's greed, the way Grandma had. Standing in Grandma's old study, looking out over the blooming rose gardens, I pulled the 4 torn pieces of that $5 million check out of my drawer. I framed them in a small silver frame and hung it right beside Grandma's favorite portrait. It serves as a constant reminder that true wealth is not measured by the paper in your hands, but by the integrity in your heart. Now, I am curious about you who listened to my story. What would you have done if you were standing in that dining room when they tore up the check? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching until the end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the video on your screen for another unbelievable story.